Topic this week is how to get along with people.
Oh yeah, what good start.
So, again and again, as we've been talking, especially this fall, but not only this fall, right? We've over and over said, okay, how do we build bridges with people? How do we get those connections that we want to get with folks who are not like us? It's easy for us, I think, to know some of the discomfort and the fear that gets in the way. So let me just acknowledge, right, that human beings in general tend to avoid connecting with people who are across whatever division from them, right?
That are not like us.
Yeah.
That are not like us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do connect with folks who are not like us, which we also do, right? But we have a tendency to connect with people who are not like us, but only on the areas that we're more alike or more in agreement. And so we have some tendencies to kind of talk around the places that we disagree or are different. For the sake of kind of getting along, which is great. That's actually like, it's a super pro-social skill to have. But it's one of those that we want to be able to do both things. We want to be able to, to get along in a comfortable way and to step into those places that are uncomfortable. So the reason we don't like to do it is that it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to address the places where, oh man, we really are very different, aren't we? And the more we've kind of categorized someone as different, either because of their racial identity or their sexuality or gender identity, or because of their economic status, or because of which cable news network they watch. We have the more sort of fixed those identities are, the harder it can be for us to kind of reach across that. Yes, Bev.
But aren't we taught socially not to bring up faith or politics?
Yeah, religion, politics, and money. Please don't talk about any of them, right? We learned that.
That's the third one. I knew there was a third and I couldn't remember.
But some people ignore those, though.
Some people do ignore that. Yeah, some people just charge right in anyway. Yeah. So instead of asking, why don't we talk about those? I want to ask, why should we? What could we gain from having conversations with people who are different from us?
Well, like for the first year, you got to be kind of careful, right? Then you can start that.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to begin somewhere, and then you can start. Then you can start growing into that.
I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you'll see a little bit of that model actually in what we'll look at today. So why would you even, other than, okay, I've spent this first, call it a year, call it whatever period of time, I've spent that time kind of pussyfooting around the places where I know we're different. And then why would I take that step into, hey, here's this thing I just don't get about you. Why would we want to go there, whether in those terms and tone of voice or some other?
You want to learn something. You want them to feel that you're interested in them, and
friendship.
Yeah.
To get to know them better. That's what I was thinking, Pam. Good.
Yeah. To get to know them better because you care about them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you want to learn something, and that could be learning about your world. That could be learning about them because they're a person that you care about. And you want them to know that you care about them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else would we hope to gain from conversations with people who differ from us?
Knowledge.
Knowledge?
Just knowledge of something different than what I know, or
Insight.
Insight, yeah.
If you
Same.
learn from their experience, it might help you apply that experience to other people like them that you don't understand.
Right, so somebody you can figure out how to get along with can help you get along with somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for example, if you know a Black person, you can have discussions with them and find out how they feel about things and why. It'd give you a better understanding of maybe of other Blacks that feel the same way, as an example.
Okay.
Well, and it would start a discussion because hopefully they'll say, well,
Yeah.
why do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, so they might want to understand you too.
We would hope.
Yeah.
Just our
Yeah.
inquiry. We don't need to be nosy.
Well,
Right.
also,
Caregiving. Yeah.
when you get to know someone who is different from yourself, you find out that you're really not so different as you thought you were.
So you can identify some of the commonalities and connections that may be obscured by the way that the ways that you do differ from each other, but you find similarities as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it turns out that the Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Commission also cares about getting to know people unlike ourselves. And in 2017, they rolled out a project they called Breaking Bread, Building Bridges. And so what they did is they got 34 people and put them in pairs. And each pair of people had 5 dinners together. And Joshua Barr, who is the director of the Civil and Human Rights Commission, said the purpose of this project was to see if, in light of the ever-growing polarization of our country, could we get people to come together despite differences in their race, sex, religion, sexual orientation, etc., and find the commonalities that they shared? So could we sort of take it as an experiment? Could we bring people together to find the commonalities that they may have? And the great news is that there's a documentary about this. Did anybody happen to see the link to the documentary in last week's Covenant Corner and watch it? Excellent. So I'm going to give you a taste, and then you're going to go dig up last week's Covenant Corner and watch that documentary, because it's great to watch a couple of these new relationships kind of develop and grow.
Last week's?
Should be last Tuesday's Covenant Corner.
Okay.
So if we don't keep week to week and you
Yeah,
send it again, I delete
December
my
1st.
emails.
Yes, I can send you the link to this again.
Would that be the 24th or the December 1st?
December 1st.
I got it. I can forward it right now if you wish.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. It's only because I don't always. Okay. And very quickly, can I have your email? Anybody else need it?
AK.
Oh,
MC.
gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else need it?
I got it.
Okay, good.
I should have it.
All right. Anybody who wants it, I'm happy to send it. All right.
Covenant Corner, December 1st, right?
You got it. Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right.
Nothing like interrupting your presentation.
So the full thing is 37 minutes long. So I'm not going to show you the full thing, but I'm going to show you the opening where they kind of set up what they're doing, and then I'm actually going to I'm going to skip ahead to a part that's going to be hard to hear because just the audio quality of the video is not great. But it's kind of the final dinner. They brought everybody together to kind of reflect on what they had experienced. And I do have the captions turned on, but the captions are broken too, just be advised. So the captions at the beginning will work. And then they start to lag by a minute or two behind the speech.
Wonderful.
So that's not great. But so when we get to that final dinner, not only is it hard to hear, it's going to be hard to read too. But
you'll interpret for us.
crank that volume up on your computer and just listen as best as you can. And we will learn about breaking bread and building bridges. You have to watch it to learn about Montserrat and Colin. They get a good sustained feature in there. So so they're going to talk about what they experienced as they went through this process of getting to know each other. And
What does the Latina do? What does she, do you know?
It tells you in a title on the screen, so you can watch and find out what she does.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
So so that gives you kind of the overview of kind of how this program worked, right? That you have these folks and they get together and they sit and eat, but they do it in kind of this structured way, right? And especially because they're coming as unknowns to each other. So they go through this process. Bev, as you described, kind of, you don't launch immediately into, who are you and what's wrong with you, right? You begin with, getting to know each other, and they began to get to know each other with this similarities bingo. And that's not similarities in terms of, can we find a little sliver of an issue that we agree on, right? But instead, what parts of our humanity do we share? In what ways are we alike, right? And not because our relationships end there, but our relationships can kind of begin at that place where we are, where we can recognize that we share that together. So then folks spent time going into each other's homes, having dinner together, getting to know each other. You also, there's another pair that you also will get to know. I won't tell you who they are. Check that out. You have to go find them for yourself. So this is how I encourage you to do your homework.
Yeah.
But then they
Homework up years ago.
after a couple of this is a couple month process of sort of exchanging meals and getting to know each other and spending time, and then they'll come to this final dinner when they kind of all reflected on the process of what they had been through together. So we will take you ahead in time to the final dinner. I've got my little time code here. So you don't get those deeper relationships with people until you open your door, right?
Literally.
Literally. And until you go in somebody else's door too. That two-way exchange, I think is such a cool piece of this program. So what did you hear folks learning in those conversations with each other that you kind of want to, like, you're glad that they learned that so that you get to own that knowledge too?
I think they're right about most of us probably have not gone to someone who we think of as different than us, of a different race, sometimes different gender, LGBTQ, whatever difference we identify, we haven't been to their house.
Mhm.
We might know them, we might work with them, but we haven't been to their house. We haven't sat down and shared a meal necessarily, but especially not in their home, a meal that they would consider a typical meal at their house.
Yeah, so we can think we've got these great relationships with folks, but if we haven't gone to that level with somebody, we may not know what we don't have.
And do you remember going out to Rich and Scott's farm?
Yes.
And I mean, we've eaten with them. They two gay men. They don't seem any different. I never thought of them as being really different. They were just nice people.
I was at their wedding.
You were at their wedding.
Mhm. Pam,
Yeah.
were you there?
Yes, I was too. Mhm.
I mean, this one man was, he was an elder at Cottage Grove, although that was kind of against the rules, I guess, according to the General Assembly. But no, it was, I mean, he was in Ann's choir, and, you know, he
He sang at my wedding.
Yes, that's
I
right.
mean, and we went out to their farm and ate and took the
Took the
kids.
Sudanese kids out there to see
took
all
the
the animals,
Sudanese- Yeah,
ride the
So-
pony.
I mean, granted, he's probably the only gay person I really have ever gotten to know, but he was just a nice guy. I mean, he was just nothing different about him.
And do you remember that serendipity group meeting we had where he talked about being gay and how he grew up? And I remember that was one of the first experiences I had talking to a gay person, and you know, how they came to that realization.
And he did it in a sermon too. Do you remember one time he
Did he?
preached
Okay.
Don't
and
remember
told
that.
us all
Okay.
about being gay and that, and it was very enlightening, and
Mhm.
yet
Yeah.
he was just a nice guy that was part of the church.
Mhm.
We still run into him at the symphony oftentimes.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so that's one of those situations where I'm guessing that this was, well, I know I know the congregation through you all, so I know that there was this sort of context of just really robust relationships where people knew that they could be who they were, and that it was it sounds like it created an atmosphere where these two men could be not only open about who they were, but actually take that extra step of explaining who they are to someone else. Which is that's one of those sort of ways that you can notice when when privilege is sort of yours in a category that's somebody else may not be privileged in that category, that if you've never had to explain what it is to be a straight person in Des Moines, that is because heterosexuality is privileged. It's centered. And there's I'm hearing that there was a context where it was possible to say, okay, I can tell that you need to understand who I am here, and I can tell you about who I am here. The woman in that final conversation who kind of drew attention back to, hey, let's talk about the fact that I am part of a racial minority. Let's talk about that here. And quoted her supervisor as saying, oh no, you're one of 70, you know. And she's like, no, I'm one of two. I'm one of two. I don't know if she is referring to non-white, specifically African American, specifically, I don't know her particular racial and ethnic identity. It doesn't come up even in the full video, so there's a disclaimer for you. But the way that she identifies and experiences the world, she is one of two people who identify and experience the world in that particular way in her office, and that's important, right? It's not just an issue that has to be dealt with, right? It is important in order to understand her, and she really wants that to be known, which is part of, you know, as when we talked about why would we want to have conversations with people who are different from us? It is partly so that we can actually love them better, right? That's what y'all said, that this is a way for us to understand each other so that we can have those better relationships. And that includes knowing where those differences are. I really love the way that this this program depended on these sustained relationships, that like once you're in, you are in for 5 dinners with somebody. So you can't be like, oh, okay, that was nice, that was fun, I'm gonna go, you know, back in my hole now. But like, you're really gonna have time to get to know whoever this person is. That you are, you're committing to spending this time with.
How long was the time period that they were together, that they had 5 meals plus a beginning plus the end? And I mean, was it a 3 or 4 month thing where they had a little time to ingest some of what they were learning?
Yeah, it was not, you know, it was not within the course of a couple weeks. It was over some time. See, now you're asking me to know for sure.
No, it's just my marketing thing. I'm always wanting to compare the whole.
I was curious of that too, though. And did they continue their relationships after the 5 dinners went by? And we may not know that yet. It sounds like it was pretty recent, but I wonder how many of them built enough of a relationship to continue friendship.
I'll call Joshua Barr tomorrow and say, hey, how did that go?
You know, they might want to say, okay, so the article says a few months from 2017 to 2018.
Cool.
So, and Joshua Barr said that it was right after Charlottesville, which was actually the week that I candidated at Covenant.
Whoa.
As I recall. And so that was, what was that? End of August, end of August?
Out the middle of August.
About the middle of August. So
Of 17.
of 17.
Yeah.
And so a few months from the middle of August running into 2018. So
That's a good time.
you know, that's a good
time.
fall and winter to
Yeah.
spend getting to know somebody. The documentary won an Emmy, a regional Emmy. So the Upper Midwest chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, in October of this year, they selected this film as their governor's Emmy. So
Has that been broadcast somewhere else? I know that I've seen, if not the whole thing, bits and pieces.
yeah, I don't know if it's, you know, if it has aired anywhere in terms of, you know, if PBS has picked it up or what have you, but if they haven't, they ought to.
Yeah,
They should.
that's a great
So,
idea.
Yeah. So yeah, and you wonder, you know, how did what do those relationships look like now? Almost 3 years on now, right? Since the end of the program.
Right.
Yeah, what does it look like to have had that encounter with someone, and then kind of move on toward, whatever the rest of life is for you.
So they're not necessarily putting a homeless person with a judge or doing, I mean, these were all pretty middle namby-pamby kind of people.
These
Andy?
these did all appear to be professional folks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
So
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
so yeah, and it would be a different setting and would take a different kind of work too, right? So let's think about what kinds of preparation, mental preparation or ground rules or what have you, would you as a professional person, you've got an education, you've got work experience, you've got a background, right? And you've got certain kinds of cultural cachet. What would you need? What decisions would you need to make in order to really have a conversation, a series of conversations with someone who is unhoused?
Oh, you mean a homeless person?
Yeah, what would you need to do to make that a safe and equal conversation?
That would be hard. It would be hard to be, like, you could invite him into your home, but like the girl who was asking the guy to her home, she had a girlfriend come to be a buffer.
Well,
And
but her boyfriend had to work or something, so to have dinner with a gentleman alone when
yeah,
you're,
that worried her. And
whoa,
afterwards, she said she wished she hadn't, but at the time she was thinking it would. To have a homeless person, some of those same kind of fears would run the gamut. Like, is it safe? Am I safe?
I
Why is
don't
he
think,
homeless? Why is she homeless? How did this happen? I'd have all kinds of questions, and they might not be politically appropriate questions, but those are the things coming to my head right now. Like, wow, that would be hard.
Yeah.
I would prefer to take them somewhere than have them in my house, to treat them to a dinner somewhere than have them in my home, because I wouldn't want them to feel bad.
Yeah.
That's like,
So now you're starting to ask questions about what would their experience of this be?
And
So-
there's a feeling of trust. I mean, you have to have trust
That
when you
comes
bring
later.
someone into your home.
right.
Trust that you are safe and that's someone you don't know, that that question would come up.
Or history, or, look on Iowa courts online first before you have them over.
You checked
Yeah.
me out when we started dating.
Yeah.
I did.
So you're thinking of ways that you would want to make yourself safe, and we didn't.
Females. We're not guys. So
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware that as a guy, I have a different level of individual personal safety as I move through the world, and I'm also aware that there are plenty of situations where if I don't look scared, it's because I'm working at it. Right?
interesting.
So the way that we think about, okay, we chose a specific kind of difference because I heard that sort of category brought into the conversation, and so what would it look like to have a conversation with a homeless person?
I love it.
It's actually it's not like you can't find a homeless person to have a conversation with. You just have to decide to, right? And you have to be willing to put yourself in a setting where you actually can have that conversation.
Would
And
they want you there?
you have to get yourself invited. Yeah, that's part of the trick. So that was,
Trick.
yeah, we
I don't
talked
wanna
about, we talked about, okay, what would I need to feel safe in this conversation? But then there's the question, what would they need in order for this to be a safe conversation for them? And we may not have answers to that immediately off the top of our head for any given category, but what would they need? Or in general, what do you think somebody needs in order to feel safe having a conversation with you?
Trust.
Hmm?
Trust.
Trust.
And you can only build that over time. So it's not like you
Trust
can walk
takes
up and say,
time.
hey, I got questions about people who don't want to live in a brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's funny, we were just talking about this not long ago. And I just don't know how to approach, except I said to Bruce, I could ask Nathan, he would help me find out. You probably know some people who are brick and mortarless. And
And I know fewer people in Des Moines than I would like to, in Des Moines and West Des Moines and the suburbs. I feel like I don't know as many people as I should.
Interesting.
But yeah, I can help you find somebody. We could do that. We could make that. We could have a field trip.
Oh, you'd intimidate them.
We used to serve
love it.
dinner once a month downtown at the shelter.
Yeah.
And we sat down and ate with them. That was part of the bring food, cook it up, serve it, and then sit down and eat with them. And those were some of the best conversations I've ever had. They were incredible how some of them had college degrees, some of them had mental illness, some of them were introverts and didn't want to talk to you. You had uncomfortable meals and you had incredible meals, and you never knew who you were going to sit down with and what it was going to be like. But it was always interesting and it was always worthwhile. And we ended up, I don't know why we stopped that. I think it just got too difficult to have it every month. I think there were some requirements they have that made it more difficult for us to do it. And it's not something we couldn't do again. And it's not something that wouldn't be worthwhile. But there are less homeless people in West Des Moines than there are Des Moines.
Are you
So
talking
yes, there
about,
may be homeless people, but they're few and far between compared to Des Moines.
Right.
I think Joppa regularly sends out teams of people to visit the homeless. They know where they are. They visit them to see how they're doing,
Take them
to
supplies.
take them supplies, food, and check it
What
out.
is the name of that group?
Joppa?
JOPPA.
Yeah.
KOPPA?
J.
Jay.
J. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they accompany folks with supplies and food and just sort of almost social work kind of connections, depending on what somebody needs. And they say that their goal is to move people from homelessness into housing. But they play the long game on that. So so they don't count their successes based on how many people did we get off the street this month, but instead, how did we get to know these folks? How have we cared for them? And that's part of earning your invitation.
Some time ago, we had a representative from Joppa speak to the contemporary issues group, and yeah, it's a very interesting program. We've since taken some things over there, and kind of also a group of friends that we belong to that used to have monthly meetings, hasn't this year. We invited the founder and his wife to one of our meetings and talk about the group and what they do. They used to have a headquarters in on East 4th in Des Moines, the southern area. That building was sold, so now they're up on Euclid,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And they've got a bigger area there now. They're building it up, be opening up for business fairly early next year.
Well, some part of it's open now, but
Yeah.
they've got a what's that one room that's opening?
But they
A computer center, basically. Yeah.
Nice.
so we
Deb, were you talking about the Eddie Davis dinners that we
Yeah.
volunteered for every month?
Well, we did.
So
those
we
too.
did that. That was in West Des Moines, but there was a shelter on 9th Street.
Shelter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And before
Yeah,
that, we did the
that's where
Catholic
we went.
Worker House. We did meals for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what the details of the shelter meal model that you were at, but that model of you can serve dinner, but then you need to sit down and eat with folks. The sitting down and eating with folks is the most important step of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Catholic Worker is just as sort of a model of engagement with the community is very interesting because their whole mission is hospitality. And
From
so
the Catholics?
Catholic workers, they're barely Catholic.
Bev.
It's a Catholic worker house, right?
That's right, yeah.
So, wow,
So
that's interesting. Hospitality. I didn't think we knew that.
So but they're an interesting they're an interesting set of people just as people.
Yeah.
But but the idea that what you're there to do is to be community, and feeding people is part of community because it's what you do for somebody in your community.
Right.
But it's it's the same as the meals in El Salvador when the directiva sits you down and feeds you, which is this really strange experience for us who are used to being the ones who sort of dole out the resources, right? But then to be served just totally changes those dynamics, right? It means that you're no longer, you're still, that you came from all these resources and you're going back to all these resources, and part of the conversations will have to do with, okay, here's what we really need some money to do. But you're not talking about any of that while you're sitting down and eating this really extravagant meal, considering who is serving it to you.
Mhm.
And that model of
You're saying that the homeless are serving you?
no, this is El Salvador.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When we
Okay,
go to visit San Isidro,
thank you. I missed that.
and it's kind of it's a requirement of being there that you receive from the community.
Oh, that would be hard.
And it's actually more or less straight out of the gospel, because when Jesus is getting ready to send the 72 disciples off to go and spread the mission, he sends them out 2 by 2 and says, wherever you go, if they'll have you in the house, stay in the house until you leave, and eat whatever they set in front of you. And you are there to depend on the hospitality of the people you are among. Anne's going to tell us a story about eating what's set in front of her.
Well, I remember drinking out of coconuts.
Mhm.
and-
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then I just cannot take guacamole, and we had this big pile of guacamole, and finally I just had to take a tortilla, and I ate as much as I could stand, and it's covered up with the tortilla. couldn't eat anymore.
That would be hard.
And Kathy was saying, oh, that was her favorite part, so she saved it for last to be dessert. It's like, oh, it's gagging me.
Not dessert to you.
I had a friend who called it yuckamole.
Yuckamole.
Guacamole.
Did you experience eating at the Canton of San Isidro? When Warren and Pastor Jan and I were down there, we hadn't yet adopted a village. We went to 3 or 4 to try them out or whatever. They tried us out, and we made a choice. One of the villages actually had one of the people cook a big dinner for us and let us sit down to eat with them, and that was pretty powerful. That's why we chose them.
That's right.
It was the good food.
Knew that was coming.
Now we
That's right.
know.
Knew
They-
that was coming.
They are still good cooks there. I tell you that. So when we have one more Monday before Christmas. There exist 2 Mondays before Christmas, but 2 weeks from tonight will be the Blue Christmas service. So join us at this same time, but it's a different link. So look in your Covenant Corner for that link.
Blue Christmas
And really
on
read the
21st.
Covenant Corner. Now that Nathan knows we don't really read it,
That's
then we
right,
just
I'm
skim
on to
through it
you.
and catch what we need. Yeah, none of us did our homework. Maybe Warren and John did their homework.
They probably did.
That's why they didn't show
We'll
up.
assume they
That's
did.
right.
Yeah.
So after Christmas, we're going to spend some. I think it'll be productive, constructive time. Really, kind of talking about some of what we just kind of touched on with the way that mission has to do with kind of receiving hospitality. And we're going to use, we have the option of 2 different sets of resources. You could use both if you want. In October, Pittsburgh Seminary, which is one of the Presbyterian seminaries, had a World Mission Initiative conference. And like all good conferences, it is completely online this year. And so we're going to have some portions from lectures presented at that conference talking about the title of the conference is Jesus Christ and the Dividing Wall, Race and God's Mission. But it's going to be kind of the idea of what does it mean for us as we're like 91% white as a denomination. What does it mean for us to be in mission in a world that is not 91% white? How can we do that better? And a lot of it is going to have to do with kind of undoing still within ourselves some of the ways that as white people with privilege, which is most Presbyterians, are in both the white category and in the economically privileged category. What does it mean for us to be in mission that's not just sort of us deciding what everyone should get and sort of handing out the bits and pieces here? So that's kind of the theological conversation of this World Mission Initiative conference. And so I'll select some pieces from that for us to engage with. There is also, should you choose to engage with reading, there also exists a book that I think is really great reading right alongside it. And the title of the book is Decolonizing Wealth. Decolonizing Wealth. And it's written by a Native American who is one of the very few Native American sort of philanthropy managers. So the people who manage the big charitable foundations and, decide kind of where the grants should go. The book kind of talks about, here's what it is. Here's where the money that is locked up in all of these charitable foundations came from, sort of, extracting wealth from the land and bodies of people of color. So the Native Americans who were displaced from the land, the African Americans who were enslaved in the land, the largely Hispanic immigrants who continue to be kind of dispossessed even as they're trying to make a better life here. We know those stories. And Edgar Villanueva says, okay, that's really just more colonialism. He worked for a foundation that used Reynolds tobacco money. So it was the Reynolds Family Foundation. It's got a first name attached to it as well. But he said, I know exactly where this money came from, and now I'm just giving pieces of it back. And so he says, what's actually going on underneath this? So it was a challenging and interesting read to kind of, what would it look like to kind of deconstruct this model where a few people have all of the money and just give pieces of it away. And what would it look like to give agency back to the communities that you're actually supporting? So you can see kind of how this Jesus Christ and the dividing wall and decolonizing wealth kind of go hand in hand. We'll focus on the content from Jesus Christ and the dividing wall, but I can heartily recommend the read as well. And I'll put this information in tomorrow's Covenant Corner. See, got all of these teasers for you.
That was a definite, what do I want to say? Axe over the head. Boom. In case you didn't get it the first time. Boom.
That's right.
Okay, tomorrow you're going to have it. Now read
That's
it.
right. And so that leaves next Monday. Next Monday, I'm going to invite us to hear from Ruby Sales. Ruby Sales is one of the elders of the civil rights movement. She was, of course, a young person when she became an elder of the civil rights movement back in the day. She's got a really poignant personal story. But then she has spent some time more recently really addressing white folks. She's African American, but she is addressing white folks really about what does it take to heal the racism within us? What does it take to heal the racial division that is within us?
Within us, meaning whom?
Within us, white people.
You.
And she's Black, and she's going to bring this conversation. This is interesting.
Yeah. She's got some really, I think, interesting insights. As we touched on ideas like white fragility, and I decided not to actually take us directly into the material with Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book titled White Fragility, but instead to have us hear from Ruby Sales, who is going to really talk to us about. She's going to talk to us about what sort of this white supremacist culture does to white people, and because she's looking at us from the outside and from the particular posture on the outside that she is, she has some, I think, really insightful things to say about what it would take to heal ourselves from not just the racism in us, but the racial wounds that we carry as white people.
How are you doing with the reading of casts?
It is next on my list.
Oh, you haven't started?
I haven't. I had another. I had a
Oh.
different. I had a different loaned to me book that I needed to read first.
The Bible.
No, he's got that down pat.
I read
So
it, Bruce. I read it a couple months ago.
But what you're talking about is really what the cast is all about. It just nails us. Boom.
excellent. We
Yeah.
might end up bringing that in January too.
There you go.
You've got so much material to deal with in January now.
Is that Decolonizing Wealth? That's for January?
Yeah, that's like recommended alongside reading for
Right?
January.
But it's January. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I was missing a Monday. I thought they
Oh.
said both for December. I said, wait, Blue Christmas.
That's right.
I'm not familiar. When you're finished,
Yeah.
I just I don't know what Blue Christmas is, other than
Okay.
it sounds depressing. But let's finish your thoughts first.
Well, I think I've kind of laid out kind of where I'm going to be leading us. So I'll answer any questions about where it seems like I'll be leading us. And then I can talk about what Blue Christmas is.
Okay. I think both of those, the Decolonizing Wealth and Ruby Sales, are excellent choices. Just from your presentation of them. I wonder, now the way you say Ruby's going to talk about, and these are snippets from, it's not a live, Ruby doesn't live in Des Moines, right?
She does not live in Des Moines, no.
Okay.
So this is
okay.
going to be 20 minutes of her speaking to another audience.
Gotcha.
But it's one sustained
I love those.
address from her to this audience.
Is it a TED Talk?
It is a TED Talk.
I
It
wondered.
is much slower paced than your average TED Talk. And part of that is that's how Ruby talks. She is a slow talker.
Is she elderly? Experienced?
She is experienced.
Thanks,
She
Pam.
was trying to remember. She was in. She turned 20 sometime during the 60s. So
Not that old.
she's not that old, no. So I
We're
was trying to
close.
remember
We're close.
the particular year in which she told the first story. So I would want to say she's probably 75-ish. So experienced, but I wouldn't say elderly, no.
Well, that's
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you. Thank you, because
We
that's
all
my
thank you
age.
for that one. Well, I figured 70 is the new 50. So, I think we can,
That's right.
we know we're,
Yeah. So she was
Yeah.
not one of the elder statespeople of the civil rights movement. She is an elder from the civil rights movement.
there you go.
But the civil rights movement was a very young movement. It was a very young people's movement. So when we look at social movements today and say, where are all of the grown-ups? They weren't in the 60s either.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the grown-ups were the ones with the batons and the handcuffs and all of that.
Right.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for answering that.
You're welcome. Any other questions?